Not
And
my
open,
kids,
yeah, well, and he wants open borders too.
of course.
He wants the mass migration of military-age Muslim males, which is what's really going on, into Western Europe, where they're causing havoc everywhere. And even Angela Merkel admitted that there are no-go zones in Germany. She
Yeah.
admitted it.
And
So we have to be
France.
honest about it. There are places you can't go now
Yep.
because they're Muslim enclaves. This is what he wants, while he lives behind his 50-foot high, 40-foot thick walls in an armed fortress which has the strictest immigration policy in Europe. So, yeah, 7 more years of him, we're going to have open borders, a higher government, a higher tribunal, a higher committee of religion, and a higher educational system. He's serving the globalist agenda on every front.
Totally.
It's
Completely.
frightening. I mean, it's not a difficult case to prove. It's like
Yep.
low hanging fruit. He's telling us these things every day.
Yep. Okay, so people don't completely despair. Let's kind of close up here and talk about what it means to recognize and resist.
Sure. I mean,
I think that's helpful. We need this.
okay. Here we're dealing with a paradox, and the paradox is this: bad news is good news. I don't want to hear about temporizing measures. That Francis said something orthodox today.
Right.
Gave us a little soupçon of orthodoxy to slake our hunger for the truth. I don't want to hear that. I want to hear nothing but bad news. Why? Because when things get this bad in salvation history, you know the dramatic resolution is on the way. This can't go on forever. There has to be a final roundup in which God sets right everything that has gone wrong. There's no reason to despair. We still have the faith. We can still find the Catholics who want the faith can find it. You know, it's the church adjusts itself and provides to those who seek it the truth, even if it becomes more difficult to find. You may end up out in a liturgical desert somewhere, but there are still good priests. There are good confessors. There are priests in the Novus Ordo establishment who are good priests and good confessors. Some of them, in fact, are more traditional. They're sounding more traditional these days than some of the people in the traditionalist orders. So it's a complex situation. It's not the end. We're in a situation that's chaotic, that's confusing, that's in some respects terrifying, but the truth is still there to be had. Good priests are still to be found. The sacraments are still available. The supernatural life of the church has not been extinguished. The problem is in the human element of the church. No matter how distorted it seems to us, no matter how chaotic the situation is in the human element, the church is still there. And so the more bad news we get, in a way, it's a cause for hope that the end is near, the end of this crisis is near, and that there's going to be a resolution. All it will take is a courageous and holy Pope. The Pope could, in a matter of days, rectify so much of the damage that has been caused. I mean, look what Benedict did. The liturgical scene is hugely improved in the church. Now you can get Latin masses everywhere.
Yeah, every town in America has it almost.
Yeah, and the graces flowing from those masses are immeasurable. So you can't kill the church. You know, you can kill off the human element in vast sectors of the church. Maybe an analogy would be a patient who has third-degree burns over 80% of his body. But there are patches of healthy skin, and the damage can be repaired. And the patches of healthy skin are there, and they're going to grow and grow and grow over time. That's the other thing. We're outbreeding the people in the so-called Novus Ordo establishment. We're having more children.
Yeah.
You know, so over time, the situation would resolve itself gradually. But I don't think we have to wait another 50 years. I'm not a prophet, but I think he's pushing things to the ultimate, to the point where there has to be some sort of dramatic intervention from on high, or he'll pass from the scene and we'll get a good pope. So I'm not despairing. I have absolute confidence in the church's indefectibility, even if I don't have the Pollyanna-ish idea that everything that comes out of the mouth of the Pope is an infallible truth, which has caused incredible damage to the church. This papalatrous notion of the impeccable and always infallible Pope. So no, there's no cause for despair. Simply look for the good priest, the good parish, the good confessor, and you'll find him. And it may even be a good priest or a good parish within the Novus Ordo. Maybe you can't get to the traditional mass and you found at least a decent, reverently offered Novus Ordo. There are certain places where the Novus Ordo is offered facing the altar. And you have a solid priest who, because he's under a bishop who would destroy him in a minute, can't introduce the traditional Mass, but he's doing everything he can to bring back tradition. We're not the pure ones, the Cathari, who can't associate with people outside of the traditionalist parishes and communities. No, we have many friends in the Novus Ordo establishment who don't have access to anything better, and they're doing the best they can. And that's the other danger, by the way. Mike Matt wrote a column about the ugly traditionalist. He talks about a traditionalist who was upbraiding some woman because she was wearing pants in church. She had come in. She was attracted by the beauty of the traditional sanctuary and the liturgy. And the woman kept hounding the woman in the pants, and the woman in the pants got up and left and maybe never came back. Yeah. We're going to avoid that pitfall as well.
Yeah.
We're not the pure ones. We're just as much sinners as anybody else on the face of the earth. It's just that we appreciate what we get from the traditional sacraments as channels of grace, which show what they convey. When the liturgy doesn't show what it conveys, people forget what the liturgy conveys. Yes. Lex orandi, lex credendi. That's why we're traditionalists, not because we're better than anybody else, right, but because we know we're not better than anybody else, and we need the best that we can get from the church to maintain a sacramental life and to avoid falling into sin. So don't despair. Look for the good priest and the good parish wherever you can find it, and wait for this situation to be resolved, as it certainly will be in time.
Yes. One positive from all of this that I've been observing over the past year and a half, 2 years, is the massive influx into traditional piety, traditional doctrine, and traditional liturgy. You've got people that are buying they're like, wait, they're changing the Catechism of Catholic Church. I'm going to go buy the Catechism of the Council of Trent.
Right.
Oh, wait, they're teaching this at my kids' First Communion. I'm going to go buy everybody Baltimore Catechisms. Oh, wait, I now realize communion in the hand and Eucharistic ministers is an aberration from tradition. I'm going to stop doing that. Or I'm going to start attending the traditional Latin Mass. I'm going to observe the Ember Days. Oh, wait, I should not be eating fish on Friday. All these people are having these epiphanies in returning to the way of our fathers, to traditional Catholicism. Yeah. You seen the same thing?
Oh, sure. Again, the trump card is the Holy Ghost. The Holy Ghost will have his way. The church will be restored, and we see this in young people. And Francis, by the way, is quite disturbed by this development. He gave a speech recently to a group of Jesuits. He had them arrange themselves in a circle, and he confided in them his thoughts, which, of course, were going to be published immediately to the whole world. And he said, have you seen these young priests in their stiff cassocks, and they wear hats that look like Saturn? Ha ha ha! If you look at these guys, there's something wrong with them. There's a mental issue. He can't abide the fact that the young priests and young people generally are being attracted to tradition, that they want the real thing. I think it was 7 or 8 years ago, there was an article in the London Economist during the reign of Benedict. And the title of the article was, "It's Trendy to be a Traditionalist." In the London Economist. And the theme of the article was, they've had enough of the hippies of the Vatican II era, of which Francis is one. He's stuck in the era of the lava lamps. His theology hasn't progressed. It hasn't progressed beyond the 1970s. And he's going to go down fighting with that old view of things. It's so ironic that the old men of the church who think they're progressives are standing in the way of the young people who want the real thing. It's so ironic that he thinks he's the progressive. He's the old fuddy-duddy standing in the way of progress. And the progress is going to be the church's restoration by young people. Again, it's inevitable. The Holy Ghost will correct the situation. It may be a gradual correction like after the Arian crisis. It took 60 years to resolve that crisis. We're entering into the 60th year now. I think we have a year to go, if you reckon it from the end of the council. So that may be the way it's resolved, or it may drag on longer than the Arian crisis, and it may take 100 years to be resolved. Again, I think it's going to be a more dramatic development, either the death of this pope and the election of a new one, which would take a miracle, by the way, given the way he's stacked the College of Cardinals, or some catastrophe in the world. I hate to say it. That's what the Vision published in 2000 is all about. It reminds me of something a late friend of mine said. One of those huge asteroids came within 25,000 miles of the Earth, the closest encounter yet. He sends me an email, and the tagline is, Too bad it missed. I mean, imagine if we had, say, 2 or 3 days notice that the world was going to end.
Oh my goodness.
Wouldn't that be an enormous grace?
It would be a huge grace for a lot of people.
Yeah,
Confession lines would be long.
the asteroid's coming for each of us anyway. We're all going to get the asteroid, a diagnosis of some kind, the death by natural causes. Every one of us is going to get hit by an asteroid. Wouldn't it be great if we had a sign from heaven? You know, I think of the book of the Apocalypse where John talks about a flaming mountain falling into the sea. Sounds like an asteroid to me.
Sounds like one.
So I don't know how it's going to be resolved. I'm no prophet, but that it will be resolved is guaranteed.
Yep.
Because the soul of the church is the Holy Ghost. And we have the promises of Christ.
Yep.
Don't despair.
Do not despair. Nope. All right. Before we say our closing prayer, Christopher, tell us about your books. Tell us about, we covered a lot of info that's in your book, Great Facade.
Right.
And I'm going to put that on the screen here. Yeah. So tell us about your work and where people can be in contact with you and what you, if this is, I mean, most people already know you, but if this is someone's first interaction with you, what do they do next? How do they learn more?
Well, what I think the traditionalist movement is, what we are as traditionalists, as masters of the obvious. It's not so easy, though, to master the obvious in an age where the obvious is obscured. So in that book, which you're holding up now, The Great Facade, I basically collect with my co-author, and I've updated it myself with about 150 pages of new material, mostly about Francis. We've collected the developments in the church. We've shown how they contradict the tradition of the church, even if there's not a formal contradiction. Again, it's by way of novelties, vague notions that undermine the actual doctrines. We go through the consequences of it, and we propose a solution. And part of the solution we proposed back in 2002 was the regularization of the Society of St. Pius X, which we're now seeing in part. But we talk about the crisis in the church as a crisis of novelty. Now, there are novelties in the church that represent a development of what the church has always taught. New prayers, for example. The rosary is a relative novelty introduced by heaven itself into the life of the church. That's an organic development. The novelty we talk about is something that has no mooring in tradition. It just comes out of nowhere, like dialogue came out of nowhere into the documents of the Second Vatican Council. We never heard of dialogue before 1962. Now everything is dialogue. So that part of that element of novelty is the subject of the book and its consequences for the church and the need to eliminate novelty and restore sound development of the church, true and beneficial novelties in terms of growth. And an increase in the content of tradition, not ruptures. So that book shows how we got to where we are today and makes a suggestion about how we can get back to where we ought to be in the church.